morning and welcome to this sixth Wellness Support Group session of ICC Crack the Wellness Code. Today is a very important day because we have completed 50% of the 10 sessions of Wellness Support Group. So that's a very interesting time point, and we really wanted to spend little time telling you what we have done, where we are going, and how we can work together, because this is a support group, so we're all together. It's not something that we are, even though we are in midst of this pandemic, we're all together, and we're all together trying to adopt wellness best practices. And we really want to hear from you how things are going with you and so on. So this is the sixth of the 10 series wellness support group activities that we have initiated for the first time. This is an experiment, so we are learning. We have sent out an email to you recently. It has the video of the previous session on emotional wellness. And then, of course, we have sent you a survey. Now, that survey is very important. Please fill up that survey. It's an online survey, so it doesn't take much time. And, after you've just finished it online, just press the send button. It will come to us and we'll analyze. And we'll take this service very, very seriously. The first time we are doing it. And this survey is also very important for the certificate, okay? Because this certificate is not just for show. It basically signifies that you have undergone this journey together. And we are also willing to help others in the community who have not been there, to tell them. And I heard some very interesting feedback before we started today's session, how much people have benefited and how they're practicing. So it's not that we are trying to help you, but you are trying to help others. So it's a very significant effort that we have met, So before, we start this session with a wonderful, speaker who's highly inspiring and graceful by sheer presence, and she'll be introduced as we go forward. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the journey of this wellness support group, because we are at a very, very important point, and we wanted to answer some of the questions as to what we have done, where we are going. So this is our mission, right? The ICC Crack the Wellness Code mission. And we say educate, inspire, empower, and impact, right? So you have also been to some of our other sessions, which are for education. And then we have this amazing wellness doctors and health heroes who help us to feel inspired after being aware of what's going on. And then here is the wellness support group, where we are here to empower, help you to adopt, wellness habits and continue with that effort and help others to change. And then the fourth part is impact. Now that's something we will going to do with all of you from January. We have partners in Stanford, UCSF, UC Irvine, who will be doing very unbiased, private studies with all of you who would like to be part of that study. Okay, the first time we are going to undertake this study, but such studies are only possible when people like you actually devote your time and your effort and your resources to wellness habits. So that's something also which is coming up. And I wanted to share that information that in January, some of you who would be acquiring certificate would also be part of the study that we are going to undertake with you. So that's an important piece of information I wanted to share. Now, a little bit of the journey. You can see that this is how the 10 sessions are spread out. We started on August 8th, and we are going to end on December 19th. Right? And we already completed, as you can see on the screen, diet, sleep, exercise, mind, body, and then we have this emotional wellness, and today we have social wellness. So these are 5 sessions. The 6th session is social wellness, and we have 4 left. So we have shared with you the video and the slides, okay? There are a lot of you who have participated in all the 5 sessions. So that's great, congratulations. However, if you have not been able to attend all the sessions, we have sent you the videos, okay? Anyone who has not received the video, we will be sending the video to everybody so that you don't miss out, okay? So here is an opportunity that if you have missed the session for some reason, personal or otherwise, and you wanted to, sort of go through this entire exercise of 10 session, please let us know, and we will be sending you the entire the package, so that you can certainly be a contender for the certificate that we are going to provide and help others. So today's topic, as you know, is social wellness. I'm not going to spend much time there because that's what you're going to hear all through. So that's where we are. And we are looking at these learning objectives for today, okay? You can see that. And by the way, this is our 79th free online session after we were hit by COVID. So that's a lot of work, a lot of effort, as you know. And I thank all of you for coming again and again and joining us for this 79 sessions. Otherwise, this would obviously not been possible, right? And this is also kind of understanding, from the community that, these sessions are brought to you online and free again and again. So this is how you donate, make a donation. It's a very simple step. This is the link, and we'll have it put in the chat box as well. And I really thank some of you who have made very generous donations, okay, online, and that really keeps us going. We are certainly going to be starting a membership base and a few other new initiatives. We are building a technology platform, including a mobile app, where a lot of this information will be available through that. So please help us to build technology to scale this program and include more content which is beneficial to you. So look forward to your integrating with this program and contributing generously. This is today's agenda. This is a very social wellness centric agenda, as you can see here. And as we move ahead, we'll learn more about it. This is our speaker will be introduced today. And finally, before we get started with Reena, whom I'm going to invite to make an introduction to today's guest speaker. This is a disclaimer and waiver of liability slide, where we just tell you that this is not a direct doctor-patient relationship. So that's there, but we certainly provide the educational empowerment. And of course, we help you connecting to practitioners if you need. And of course, we for the benefit of others, for education, this will be on recording. So just want to let you know that. So having said that, I would invite our event, moderator and also the coordinator of ICC Crack the Wellness Code Wellness Support Group, Reena Johar, to take on from here and introduce our guest speaker and of course run today's proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Somji. With a very, very warm welcome to the Honorable Wangmo Dixey. She's an executive director of the Dharma Foundation in Berkeley. She is the eldest daughter of the Venerable Tartang Tulku. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, ma'am. The director of the college, executive director of the Light of Buddha Dharma Foundation International, and the president of the International Buddhist Association of USA. She has got many, many accolades nationally, internationally. She's got BA in Interrelation in the UCLA and an MA in International Development, American University. So we welcome our guest today for social wellness with very, very warm welcome to you, ma'am, Ms. Wangmo Dixey.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with all of you. Thank you to Sachin, Dr. Sachin, and Soma, and Dr. Reena. It's a pleasure to be with all of you and to share a little bit about my life and to basically take you on a journey. And the topic today is really about integrating all three, body, speech, and mind, into direct experience so that we can realize the extraordinary potential that each of you have. So the presentation is called Lotus Vision, an Unfolding into Daily Wisdom. Now, for me, it's this journey that we are all on. our human precious journey, which we call life. And it starts when we take birth, and we take a journey, a very precious journey in our life. And how do we make it rich and meaningful and purposeful so that things that come up that may be difficult can actually be places or starting points for the lotus to unfold. Just as body, language, and mind are all vehicles toward our liberation, towards inner freedom. Each is a lotus emerging pure and beautiful from the muddy waters of our own experience. This is so true from our muddy waters of our experience. It's not coming from pure water, but through perhaps difficulties, challenges that we can arise from that into a beautiful lotus. Soma, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Just a little bit about myself. I was born here in the Bay Area, brought up in a Buddhist context. My father is a Nyingma Lama, Tibetan Lama, who came here as a refugee in 1968. And he's dedicated 50 years of his life to preservation of the Buddhist culture. And he is my shining example of someone who really brings his entire life into his work. It becomes his dharma. And so, in a similar way, in terms of looking at inspiring examples, we have examples all around us in our life. He is certainly one of them for me. And the example that he illuminates is that we can use work as our spiritual practice. We can also see any challenges that may be coming up as an opportunity for real growth. And ultimately, to use wisdom along the way in our life to guide us on this journey. And as I mentioned, that we can use this muddy water to allow this lotus to fully blossom. That each struggle or each challenge is a new way to open into a starting point, and it allows us to enter into a new freedom or a new way of being. Next slide. So I'd like to read you a quote from my father. We can celebrate our innate freedom. I commit to freedom when I commit to the path of inquiry that sets no boundaries. When I know what I embody in body, in language, and in mind, I gain a special kind of certainty. I am free in this journey through life, and I have no concerns for whatever journey may come next, for I recognize the usual distinctions have lost their hold. That is what the Lotus Trilogy teachings have to offer. Now, you may have heard that I'm the director of Dharma College, and this is really at the core of what we like to get to, is to go fresh into direct experience, not something in the past or in the future, but really directly into the moment of experience, where we can understand that these limitations that we put on really depend on I. And so, in order for us to break through from that, we have to have a thorough understanding of mind. And then we can get into the direct experience for the blessings to flow. So, that is essentially how wisdom comes to be. It's no longer caught up in the conceptual framework, but we break free from that into an inner freedom where we understand what body, language, and mind hold us back from being. Next slide. Thank you. So there's a commitment that we ask of you. You could write a letter to yourself, asking yourself what you would like to commit to for this week. And I only ask that of you because that commitment is going to be how we see ourselves more clearly. You can set any kind of a goal or aspiration, and it seems like you've had, so many classes up to this point and you've learned so much. Perhaps there might be an objective that you want to set this week to really begin to dive into a deep understanding of self and mind. So that can be anything from, being more mindful of your food habits, or taking a good walk and making that a regular habit. So, what are the things that you would like to call on in your daily life as sort of a commitment that you take of yourself? And that's very important to establish at the first step, because when we establish that, we can see so much about ourselves in the work that we commit ourselves to. Next slide. Thank you. So let's just take one of the points that I'd like to really bring into this conversation is just a sense of connecting to stillness. So let us, for just 2 minutes, sitting where you are and just allowing the body and mind to just settle into a space of stillness. And you may have heard in your many classes above that the stillness comes when we pay attention to the breath. And so, what I would ask is that our eyes remain just in this gentle equipoise, looking at the tip of your nose and paying attention to the outward breath and inward breath, and just letting the mind and the thoughts settle into a space of just breath. So let's do that for just a couple minutes, because I would like this to become part of your weekly commitment to yourself, is to be able to touch stillness in your life. And this is available to each of you. It's completely free. And so in moments when we have difficult times, or we're nervous, or we're challenged, we can dive deep into the stillness and just connecting to the breath. This is the mind and body coming together. So let's just practice that for 2 minutes. I know many of you know how to meditate, but I just want to, for the purpose of this presentation, to bring in the stillness. So let's do that for a couple minutes. Just keeping your eyes half closed, or if you'd like to keep your eyes closed, most welcome. Most important is just to let the body be relaxed. And our attention is on the breath. And we're noticing the rhythms of our breath. If thoughts are appearing, we just bring our attention back to the breath in a gentle way. Okay, thank you. That is a way for us to connect to stillness. And it's available to each of you, wherever you may be, even on the plane, that we can apply just our attention to observing our breath. So this becomes part of our daily habits, it becomes part of our social way of being. A natural way of being is to attend to stillness. And one may consider starting out the morning this way by just a moment to yourself of connecting to stillness. Because with stillness, clarity arises. Just as when mud begins to settle in the water, you begin to see more clearly. So I would encourage each of you to adopt a practice of stillness, a practice of meditation in your daily life. Earlier, I had talked about making a commitment to yourself. That may be the commitment. The commitment is important because it allows us to put a framework of understanding what it is that we're going to put effort towards, so we can become closer to understanding more about mind and self. Let's continue on this journey. Next slide. So here it says to take at least 10 minutes if you can in the day, any part of the day. It may be morning, it could be the end of the day, but just to allow 10 minutes where you connect to your breath. And I like to encourage you to find a beautiful place, a place that you like to go and feel deeply relaxed. And it doesn't cost anything. It could just be in nature. It can just be in the woods, or when you're walking somewhere and you can find a bench, just to connect to that quiet space. The mind and body, when they are quiet, it becomes harmonious. Some people call it at peace. Some people may call it being fully cooperative, not disconnected, not disharmonious. So we're trying to find this place in our inner being to come to that middle point where we find that balance, that sweet spot where mind and body connect together. So the exercise here is just to connect to our breath and to establish that connection to stillness. And we've done that this morning by having a 2-minute experience. So sometimes we forget that our life is so precious, that we are on a human journey here. This life is truly precious. It is sacred. And so it is important to also, I feel, reflect what goes on perhaps in that week, or you have been going on a course with this program. And I'm sure that you have been reflecting changes that have been happening in your life over the weeks. So note that down, note to self what is happening with those changes, because those are gems of wisdom that you can cultivate and you can become more aware of the difficulties of concentration, the difficulties or challenges that you've been able to break through. So these are reminders, and writing a note to oneself can sometimes be very inspiring because we can see the change that is taking place when we put attention into this journey. Next slide. So for our journey to be meaningful, we need to see what's at operation here. That is body, speech, and mind. All three. In some traditions, we call it the Trikaya, the triple gem. Each of them are very important to cultivate and to understand. First, of course, it's to understand the power and the relationship between body and mind, and of course, our language, the labels that we begin to define our reality. And this takes a long sort of uh, uh, opportunity for us to engage with each other, and would encourage you to take a class if you'd like. But the power of language, the power of how we construct our reality through the words and labels that we set, which seals the experience. When we say something is the way it is, it seals the experience, sets the boundary, and in a way, we lose our freedom in that moment. So we need to understand the power of language, but also how is the mind interpreting or translating that experience? What is the mind here in terms of reflecting out the experience so that we understand, or then it also comes into body. So let's say for a simple emotion like happiness, there can be some word that describes our happiness. How does that relate to how our mind interprets happiness? And then ultimately, how can we feel the happiness in our body? So that's constantly going on in the rhythms of our being. But it's very rare for us to stop and pause and to understand really what is happening in our human beingness. We often just continue to do in a repetitive way that somehow our life just goes from, 10-year blocks until one day we wake up and we're 50. And so we have to ask our question, how did we arrive at that point? So in order for us to arrive at understanding, we need to begin to zoom in to our life and to recognize the preciousness of each moment as it appears, if we can. If we can't do moment to moment, perhaps we can do, 24-hour blocks, and to realize what is happening. Now here it says, every minute, every hour, time is passing. How does your daily schedule look like? If this is just a kind of common example that we typically have 8 hours of sleep, we have an hour for breakfast, we work for 8 hours, maybe we do 2 hours of practice, 1 hour of dinner, and then 4 hours to do something else. By the end of the week, 24 hours has gone by so fast. And how much time have we really been mindful, or how much time have we looked closely at how we are manifesting moment to moment? Because time is going by so fast, even as I'm speaking to you, time is running. So it's important for us to pay attention to how this precious time is manifesting and how we are showing up in that time to fully understand who we are. Once we understand who we are, we can in a way become our own master. When things become difficult and challenging, we can understand why those things got set up the way they did, why we got caught up in that, why we got entangled in that. So we know ourselves better. Rather than somebody else telling us, but we know ourselves. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So it's important to pay attention to what we call the trilogy, body, speech, and mind. So can we, as an exercise here, begin to pay attention to those three together? How does the body relate to the mind and language during your week? Can you tease out the body part, in a particular experience? How did the body feel at that particular time? How did the mind interpret that? Or what language or commentary did we put on that experience? So I'd like you to start to think about your week or certain experiences in that lensing way of looking at body, paying attention to body, language, and mind. Next slide. So ultimately, where I'm moving to is that we need to find the right balance or the right rhythm so that they begin to cooperate with each other. It says here, the rhythm of rising, eating, working, and sleeping creates a framework for effective action that connects our lives to time. Within this framework, create a daily schedule that maps out time for work, reflection, family responsibilities, and other activities that are important to you. Once you've made this schedule and experimented it for a few days, resolve to stay safely and closely within it for this week. When you break your schedule, take time to reflect carefully on what has happened to bring this about. After a while, the schedule you have established may become quite routine. At that point, look to see how you can make it more complete or more challenging. Ask yourself what level of care you are putting into it. Now, as lay householders, we're not living in a monastery. So it is so important to see that our time is so precious and that we can apply practice, spiritual practice in our work life, in our 24 hours, that we can attend to us, begin to see that time can be divine. Time can be a spiritual place for us to take refuge. But we need to pay attention to what's happening in our life, pay attention to what's happening in our day, so that we can cultivate what is going on inside in this internal mechanism that we manifest um, through our activities. So ultimately, our activities become an offering of who we are. So that's why it becomes so rich and meaningful, that our life can be a way to cultivate this activity as an offering, as a display of our goodness, of our wholesome activities. Next slide. First, we take care of the self, and then we take care of the connection to society and how we are manifesting in our social environment. But it's important when we're looking at the individual that we begin to see any cracks that break that flow. So those cracks are when we get interrupted in the flow. The flow is the harmony between body, speech, and mind when we're fully cooperated. And it's almost as if things are going so well. You may have experienced that personally, where things just seem like it's just, there's no cracks. It's just going so beautifully, blissfully well. That's perhaps when you can sense in your body a sense of cooperation between the three. There's a harmonious quality internally that manifests in our work. And so if there are cracks that happen, let's pay attention to what is causing those cracks. What is causing that interruption or disrupting that flow? So that's when we're starting to pay attention to how did we arrive at that particular moment with a crack. Next slide. So here's really where we come to sort of the key point here. We want, just as when rowers are working together as a team, we need to work together in our embodiment in a beautiful flow, encouraging this cooperation between body, speech, and mind. I noticed that earlier you had a session on body and mind. Now I'm adding the element of speech or language. So the three together, the Trikaya, the triple gem, all need to work together in this cooperative manner, where in a way that's what manifests the beauty and the blessings that are fully about, in bountiful ways. But we can't realize that or recognize that because we are always being disconnected in some way. So we want to reconnect to this flow, to this balance. Next slide. So ultimately, what we believe in our community is to use work as our practice. And I've had many extraordinary personal experiences of working that goes beyond what I thought was capable, what I thought was capable. For example, I'm brought up in the West with, having been, educated in Western universities, having traditional parents, but being asked to go to one of the most traditional places of Buddhism, which is Bodh Gaya, which is the seat of enlightenment, and to be asked to somehow bring together all the various lineages of the Theravada tradition, where there was a break or a crack for 700 years. These lineages did not work together for political reasons. There was many cracks along the way, historical reasons. Anyway, it so came to be that my father sent a sort of mission impossible to find a way to bring these monks, these Buddhist monks from Southeast Asia, to return back to this Bodhi tree and to recite the precious teachings of the Buddha and to recollect the sacred word again after a gap of 700 years. Now, on paper, this seems impossible. First of all, where do you start? Coming from Berkeley, coming from, modern technology, looking into ancient world. But it happens, and it is happening, because the long story, make short, is that 16 years ago, we were able to just find a way to start with a small group, and now it has become an international ceremony where there are more than 7,000 Buddhist monks and nuns who are registered, many who are not registered, who come together for 10 days, and we have been reciting 1,000 pages every year in 7 languages, 7 scripts of the Pali scriptures. And this required going to Sri Lanka, to Cambodia, to Thailand, to Laos, to various parts of India, to Myanmar, and so forth, to reconnect to these great masters who sometimes were in the forest. Sometimes I had to climb mountains and to caves without the same common language. But there was an understanding even before I arrived that I was coming. And those great masters are now coming back to teach what they've understood under the sacred Bodhi tree. So the common theme when I met these great masters was, this is the time that we return back. That time, this time in our history happened to be right in the bullseye moment of, yes, this mission that seemed impossible could become possible. I was just a conduit. I'm just in a way, just a messenger here. But this kind of project has happened many times where you think something is impossible, inconceivable, even at a historical point of view, but somehow with great effort and you stepping outside of it, there's a flow that happens. And so perhaps one of the reasons why I'm in this call is because my life especially in the last 18 years, has been more and more about that. And I feel more comfortable living in this space where we begin to see the cooperation between body, speech, and mind. So I just share that with you as one example, but I'm sure many of you in this call have had great examples of going beyond what you think is possible. So let's go to the next slide. I'm about to finish, but our life is an opportunity for us to transform, especially if challenges come up in your life. This COVID period is deep with challenges. Look at our political situation, look at our economic situation. So many points of views in our life now are being overburdened with so much stress that we as a human being feel overwhelmed, feel so stressed out, right? So how do we bring this situation, this unique situation, as an opportunity for us to really grow, to really see the precious life that we are in at this particular moment, which is deep hardship, into growth, so that we can see the muddy waters as great ingredients for our full blossoming of the lotus. So we need to remember that the lotus comes from muddy waters. It doesn't come from clear, clean water. So we can use this opportunity, these difficult circumstances that we are in right now in society, as an opportunity for growth. And it depends on you. So I'd like you to see that if this week may be a challenge that comes up for you, I'd like you to note it and see what is happening to those three vehicles, to body, speech, and mind. What if we started to free ourselves of labeling, of saying that as a challenge or an obstacle? Could we play with it and see it as an opportunity and have a bit of lightness with it? So if something difficult comes up for you this week, what if we started to play with that as an object of refuge and transform that challenging and difficult space into an opportunity for lightness? And that once we begin to know how to play with that, because it depends on you, how you interpret it. It's not like some outside force is going to do this for you. So you need to engage with that and find ways and solutions so that we ultimately are in that cooperative space. I think we're coming to the next couple slides. So next slide, please. So this is the lotus unfolding. And this is what I'd like to share with you. The richness of what these are some words to kind of hang off of my own personal experience, but ultimately you have to use your life as really the guiding light to understanding who we are. And so we continuously need to check in to know ourselves better. And we have this opportunity, especially now when we're spending much more time in the house. Maybe we are not, don't have to talk so much because of our social context with work, but we can spend more time with ourselves to know ourselves better, so that when difficult things arise, we know how to handle it. So I share those reflections with you all, and look forward to learning more about you, and if there are any questions that come up, that maybe we could have a dialogue here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wangmo, Honorable Wangmo. That was very, very impressive. I could feel a stillness within myself. And I'm sorry if you can hear some sound, but amongst the sound, I could feel the stillness. So that was very important. So I'm sure every one of us, right from, I can see a lot of people are interacting. They have a lot of questions for you. And I would rather that they ask you the questions themselves so that they can interact with you better. Then we have Tina Puri. She said, wow, very powerful and so moving. She said, thank you so very much. Then we have Mikhail Lubovich, who said, what is speech? What does that mean and how to deal with stress?
Speech is what is being communicated, what is being presented. And so we can pay attention to even the sound of what is being communicated, how my voice is being presented. But we can also begin to examine how the language begins to set up our reality, how our language begins to set up the framework for how we are seeing this reality. So paying attention to words, paying attention to the labels that we use to seal up that experience. And once we seal up that experience, there's somehow a definitive quality of what that is. We're putting a statement. And so language is very powerful. And so I just want you to start looking at how we use communication, how we begin to communicate with each other, both good and bad, but the power behind the word. And so look at that, see what's coming up for you. Thank you.
I have a question. There was a slide, and you talked about interaction and cooperation. That's something which is in essence of the social wellness, the theme of today's session. So would you like to highlight on that, and also cite some experience from your own life, how cooperation and interaction really helps to enhance well-being in terms of social integration, and being creating a social network which is very fulfilling. So anything on that would be very useful.
Well, I think the best example in this Buddhist work that I do is bringing together streams of communities that have been so um, on the fringe of each other or separated historically. And it happened to me in the moment after many years of finding ways to bring us together. There are many reasons why people don't come together. Either, in some say, because of in my example, particular association to temples, their affiliation to countries, their affiliation to their own identities. And so there are many reasons to separate people from really joining community. And it took me many years of an aha moment where I was sitting under the Bodhi tree and I could see the complete stream of all of these lineages returning back together. And it was so beautiful to be in the midst of all of these great monks and nuns that had been separated for hundreds of years, and to hear the sound of the sacred teachings being communicated again, being articulated again at the place where the Buddha became enlightened. And so for me, that was the great aha moment when we recognize that the togetherness, the unity of building community or the building cooperation between each other is actually is possible. And I'll give you one other example of how beautifully manifested this happened. As you know, in many religions, there are different sects and different lineages that sometimes are fraught with historical differences. And I happen to be at one year where it's even considered like higher in terms of name. They're the Vajrayana, and I was working with the Theravada, which also has a connotation of the lesser view. And I'm actually born into a Vajrayana family, so it was very awkward for people to know why was I supporting or why was I in this other group. And it happened to be where the head lama or the headmaster was in the sea of all of these Theravada monks, and outwardly seen as teaching to them, because the throne is higher and the monks, the Theravada monks, are very simple. So, and their devotees cut off all the microphones of the Theravada, so the only masters from the Vajrayana could be heard. And this was all happening under the Bodhi tree, where everyone is aiming for spiritual enlightenment. This is the only place in the entire universe that you go for this kind of determination. And how could this happen? It was such a sad moment in my heart to recognize all of the efforts, all of the energy, all of the dedication from all of these communities, and then to be erupted in the sense of like, I need to teach, or I need to be, I'm showing off, or etc. But just a simple moment of a monk coming to me saying, let us make offerings around the Bodhi tree. And it just appeared as a thought, why don't we make offerings to each other? The Theravada monks to the Vajrayana lamas. And so it ended up being a complete festival of offerings, of so much love for each other. And so much, it started with just a simple offering of fruits to each other. Then it became like other kinds of dana offerings. And at the end of it, both sides felt so joyous that they had an opportunity to be together and to pray together and to make offerings to each other. So I think sometimes we, that kind of impossible, even historically, it has not happened. But you listen, you tune in, and maybe you hear something that feels like going beyond what is the status. I don't know if that sort of answers the particular question in our current modern conditions in the Bay Area, but for me that was very much a kind of inspiring moment.
Yes,
Yeah,
and I wonder if perhaps you answered it, but I was, let me try and scroll back up to it. But basically, just interested to learn about your approach um, to creating this reunion. And I guess you mentioned that you encouraged people perhaps not to make each one was making an offering perhaps to something ideological, and it seems like you are having them make an offering to each other, and that the warring like people were factioned because they were all kind of competing about where they should be projecting up to, but when they started to be interacting or I guess giving that same energy amongst themselves, that created community. Yeah, just kind of interested to see how, I mean, I don't know if that's an accurate representation of how you achieved that.
Absolutely. It's a really hard point for me in terms of the work that I've done is to see how groups come together so beautifully. But you have to be really authentic. You can't just take an idea and then plop it into the context where social differences exist. The effort of working with each other and remaining as much as possible unbiased. I have had to be in this unique position of sitting with 7 countries that each have very particular ways of mandating their wishes, especially since Buddhism is at the heart of these countries. And so there are many, many layers of wishing to exist and show up with a unique identity. But the more that we can get to the core of the aspiration of the goodness of whatever is collectively bringing the group together, and staying true to that, staying unbiased on either side, trying to be in the middle. And it's a very unique place to be. It's a very special place that you're being invited into to kind of play a role there in an authentic way of not being biased. And I think that today we have a lot of biases, and we can see that in our own selves. So paying attention to where those biases may exist and keeping clear from that. So we just remain with the goodness, cultivating the wholesome activities of it.
Thank you.
so let's take some more questions from the chat box. So we have a question by Bala Ramakrishna, saying that in our daily lives, when we speak, do we always bring body and mind together to make our speech effective?
It's not something that happens automatically, but I want us to begin, if you can, if you see the value in this, if you begin to see the value of body, mind, and speech, maybe independent of each other first. But then if you begin to see how they interact with each other and the power of that, then I think you can begin to see when it does happen. It's not something automatic, but you recognize it when there's a flow. You recognize it when there's harmony, when there's cooperation of all three. It just feels right. It just feels like it couldn't be more perfect. That moment is just perfect. That timing is just perfect. And you can only know that, but you have to practice with this because it doesn't happen automatically. And it's not something that we can give you the formula for how to get there. It needs to be spontaneous, but we need the awareness to look into that.
Very beautiful presentation, Wangmo,
Thank
and
you.
this touched my heart. So the question I have is like as you mentioned about applying the spiritual practice into your work life, right? We can take it into that space because we have just 24 hours, and we spend how you kind of shared the day routine, right?
Mhm.
So what we experience in our day-to-day life, right, as we are at work, right, we go through a journey of competition, jealousy, unfairness, right? And that starts impacting our thoughts, words, and actions, right? Your thoughts go like amazingly, kind of you go all over the place, right? And those starts manifesting, right? So means I think my question was how we can stay unimpacted, right? Or how we can stir ourselves away from those thoughts to starts manifesting in the wrong direction, right? Because your thoughts are kind of trying to, one is to protect yourself, because you have to protect yourself to avoid the unfairness or things which are going in that direction. But at the same time, you want to stay away from the negative thoughts coming into your mind. So what do you suggest, right, with your experience, right? How can we draw a balance to kind of not go into the negative thoughts, stay
Mhm.
away from that, and at the same time bring in the fairness, right, and fight for yourself or protect yourself?
Such good questions and such real questions. These emotions are so strong and they take us over, and hardly even a moment of awareness can arise because that emotion is just so deep and so strong. It takes us over. So I would say that our life is our spiritual practice. This is the work that we have to engage in. And the more that we can pay attention to what is coming up for ourselves, good and bad, but especially I think the bad and the challenging is in a way kind of gives a red alert for us because it somehow disrupts the flow. So I like to see it as a place where we ring the gong there. It's almost like we like to ring the gong to achieve peace in a meditation cushion. But why don't we apply the ringing the gong when those negative emotions or those negative afflictions come up? We just mentally ring the gong. Aha, this is what's coming up at this particular moment in time. Let us begin to apply the stillness. Let us begin to apply what we have understood of ourselves. Now, ultimately, this journey depends on you, depends on how you crack the code, right? This is all about cracking the code. So, how have you been able to crack this human code? We're trying to decode this. But first and foremost is to recognize that our life is so precious. We don't want time to just take us over that suddenly at 60, 70, we're thinking, oh, what happened? What happened here? We want to use every moment, those difficult times especially, as an opportunity for us to see what is going on and for you to recognize how did you get set up there. That's the starting point. And to know also inspiring examples of people who have used those muddy waters as a way to transform into something beautiful. You can transmute that. It is possible. So there are great ancient masters who've done that, who've transmuted that particular emotion into the opposite and transcended that. So it depends on all of us how we're able to crack that code. I don't know if I've answered that question, but
No, I
it's
think thank you so much for kind of I learned the beautiful thing which you mentioned, that you need to kind of go into that stillness, right, as your thoughts are kind of start generating, because that's where basically the origination is happening, and you will see the light, right?
So Wangmo,
Thank you
I
so
have
much.
a question for you. I would like
sure.
to, we can't finish this session without sharing your experience of your amazing work in India. and the Buddhism is practiced in West versus in India are so amazingly different. It's like, you know, so how you able to make all that social transformation coming from this area, going from West, studying into the West, and going back to the traditional people and motivate them to do this inspire work. And they've done such a amazing work with, affecting probably millions of people who practice Buddhism in the eastern part of the world. So will you share some stories like what were the roadblocks, hurdles, how you brought that social transformation, and then how it also helped for the social wellness of those people who are suffering? So a lot of wonderful projects you do, including supporting them materially, like with food, resources, but same time also to bridge the spiritual gaps between these two sides of the world.
Mhm. Yeah, I thank you so much, Sachin. It's such a, I'm still learning as I go along, but I've been very blessed because, in a way, my father has given me sort of certain responsibilities that I think have asked me to step up into the to understanding, and really through my experience, I look at that the roadblocks as real opportunities for growth, and things that going to the East and not necessarily being born in that culture, but just being with the people and understanding the needs and being open to that and being a vehicle of whatever support and change you can be. It's almost as if you no longer really have that identity. You know that you've been charged with a responsibility, and you take that very with care, with deep care. It's something that's precious and so sacred to so many people. But because of that, you are in a unique position, so you treasure it, and you do whatever you can to make the supporting environment so that people ultimately can come back together. Now, here in the West, the Dharma is very new, and my father was one of the first waves of Tibetan Buddhism to enter into this Western soil. So even though I've been brought up, with structures and Buddha images and prayer flags and texts all over me, texts around me, I think that the language of decoding what Dharma means in one's daily life here in the West is something where I have to begin. And the West here is all about, the competition, the productivity, and our modernization is moving so fast that it's very hard for us to catch up with it, like internally. And so there seems to be a real opportunity for this wisdom tradition to be part of these modern conditions. But the gap is in the translation and how we transmit that language into this culture so that it benefits them knowing the language that makes sense to them, not that we are culturally appropriating, India or these ancient wisdom into the West, but the West begins to identify and has language that they can get aha or examples or inspiring leaders who have gone through this process. So I think the West has a lot to benefit from the Eastern wisdom, and the Eastern wisdom should be looking at the West to see carefully how modernization is moving so fast.
Yeah, thank you, Wangmo. Will you explain a little bit 2, 3 projects which you created and how they came into the real life when you went to India first
Sure.
time? Yeah.
which actually benefited a lot of people. I mean, basically, the
Yeah.
whole idea of cooperation and interaction. Yeah.
Thank you. So, um, in the examples that I've shared with you about the Theravada Tipitaka chanting program, it started in 2006 and it's ongoing every year in December under the Bodhi tree, and thousands of monks from 11 countries come together and they recite in Pali, the ancient tradition in Pali, which was actually a spoken tradition. It wasn't written down. So it's written down only by phonetic transliteration into 8 different scripts: Bengali, Burmese, Sinhalese, and Roman. And so cite 1,000 pages of the 3 baskets of the Buddha's teachings, which have been collected in 84,000 teachings. This is the corpus of his teachings in the Theravada tradition. And we have been taking sections from the very beginning of the sutras up to now. So 16 years, every year 1,000 pages, and we all recite together. Now that process started off with tents being individually placed in the main temple, and each had large speaker phones, and some countries who were much more well off had very fancy speaker phones, and those who were not so well off had sort of the very modest little, standby speaker phones. But over time, we've been able to come under one voice, one sound, one voice. That means that we all collectively decided that rather than having the Thais be, this outstanding sound and the Burmese on another side of the temple, that we will take turns each day having each country lead the Sangha or the community, which is the Sangha, in prayer or in the reading of 100 pages, so that we all get to see the beauty and the diversity in the Buddha Dharma. So the Buddha being the one that has gone beyond, the Dhamma are the corpus, the teachings. So we call it the Buddha Dharma. And it says that when you have realized the Dharma, you can see the Buddha. So by hearing these teachings, we believe that ultimately, the transcendence of seeing the awakened one is possible because we've understood the teachings of what has been left behind. Now, all of these sacred teachings, going back to even, the Hindu tradition, these are all sacred scriptures that need to be ultimately translated in our lives. How does it land in our life? Now, so for me at Dharma College, that has been the big job. We have a beautiful temple with all of these sacred scriptures, probably the largest temple in the Bay Area. It gets used once in a while when we have great speakers, but sometimes I look into this room and I think, this is so awesome to see these gold-plated scriptures of the Prajna Paramita, Prajna being wisdom, Paramita going beyond, these wisdom sutras that have gone beyond our conceptual mind. And these great figures who went beyond and actually exemplified that because they could speak about that. Now, how does that land in downtown Berkeley? Here we have a building called Dharma College. And how does this land? It can't just remain as philosophical ancient scriptures. We have to bring it into our life. We have to make it come alive so that we can understand and we can recognize what these teachings were pointing to. What were they referring to? And that's the big job. That's the cracking the code. We need to understand what is it pointing to in our own human experience. And that's why it's so rich, good and bad. It's so rich. So everything is an opportunity. So don't dismiss anything. Thank you.
And that's a big social change to be transformation to be addressed, right? And the gap that you've been referring to.
Yes, and this gap is very big because ultimately the big work happens with us. We need to understand that, and we need to be examples of that. And that call to action is what we are doing. And it's every day frustrating every day challenging. Every day requires us to look carefully and see what is happening.
Thank you so
And
much. We have far exceeded our time,
yeah,
and really thank you for your time, your gracious presence, and all the knowledge that you shared with us.
Thank you all so very much for being here. It's just been an honor to meet all of you again. And I wish you, great success, especially during this period of uncertainty. Now, since we are living in the West and in the modern world, we can apply the traditional sutras or wisdoms. And I'd be happy to share with Soma links to various places that you can hear, and you can also read different sutras. But ultimately, what we do at Dharma College is to translate that into our daily life. And though I can give you, pointers to, for example, the Four Noble Truths, the Dharma Chakra Sutra, which was one of the first sutras that the Buddha taught, of turning the Dharma, the motion of the Dharma in motion, turning the wheel of the Dharma in motion, which happened right near Varanasi in Sarnath, what he came to understand after his enlightenment. That might be the first place. But ultimately, we can hear those words and we can hear what he was pointing to. But ultimately, we need to recognize that our value is so precious and that we have to take refuge here with our body and our mind and our speech. But let us begin in understanding our own being. And I hope that this journey that you've been on with Crack the Wellness brings it all together, and that you put the intention and the curiosity into knowing who you are in a deep way for the benefit of understanding yourself, but ultimately for the benefit of all. So that when we understand how suffering arises, we can have great compassion for others, and that we can work in our society and our environment and truly participate in an awakened way. Thank you so much. Thank you.